It's time for some epic PC building!
Bye, have a great time! Hello there.
Welcome to another episode of I Flex on You Kids. This time, it's PC building time. With the national lockdown and being able to work from home for most of the year, I was able to save up a bit of money that would have otherwise gone to whoever owns the London Underground, and decided to spend the extra money not on the boring stuff like paying the bills or taking my girlfriend to a fancy dinner or maybe finally getting some Udemy courses to stop sucking at coding games. No, instead, I went ahead and bought a bunch of new PC components so that I'm ready for when cyberpunk comes out. Now, everybody knows the most important thing you need when building a PC is a table. Unfortunately, I had to sell my table alongside with the rest of my furniture to even be able to afford to buy all of these components, because actually it turns out I spent quite a bit of that travel money I talked about earlier on the new Dota 2 Battle Pass, and so instead of a table, we will have to use my floor to build this thing on. First thing you always need to do when building a PC is to hook up your CPU to the motherboard. That's just PC building 101. I have the AMD Ryzen 3800X CPU, so I had to go with a motherboard that has an AM4 socket, which in my case ended up being the MSI B450 Tomahawk Max. The CPU cooler I'm using is just the regular one out of the box, which luckily came with the thermal paste pre-applied, which is a big plus because I neither have the thermal paste applier nor the thermal paste itself. Not that you care about any of this. You can professionally mount the CPU and the cooler onto the motherboard by copying what I'm doing on the screen right now. Totally ignore the fact that I smeared the paste all over the chip and then removed it right after, so I had to go and buy the extra thermal paste anyway, which not only set me back like 2 days, but also cost my revenue from all my previous videos on this channel combined. The tutorial I was watching to help me with the building process suggested I put the RAM on the motherboard before putting it inside the tower, which I did with absolute grace in a total of 10 minutes. At that point, I was ready to insert the motherboard into the tower and screw it in. This was done very easily and quickly, just like your mom. The next thing I did was install the 3 extra fans I bought, because one insanely hot thing is more than enough per household. You can see me professionally test which direction the air flows in on your screens right now. One thing I didn't notice about these bastards is that Corsair didn't include the screw holes in them, which is fine for front-facing fans, but I needed to mount these assholes to the top and the back, so the screw holes needed to be forcefully added. Luckily though, I became insanely buffed between my last video and this one. I mean, those dumbbells you saw at the beginning of the video weren't just sitting there for show, you know? And so it was a piece of cake for me to drill them in. Next thing, I mounted the power supply, but forgot to film it because my body was kinda exhausted from all the manual screw hole drilling. So here is a post-mortem on the power supply being already in without the cables already attached. That, by the way, is a big no-no, because you should always attach your cables to the power supply before you mount the supply in, or else you will end up doing this quite a lot. Then I mounted my HDD and SSD, put in the GPU, plugged in all the fans, the front panel, linked into the power supply, did some basic cable management. I mean, not too much you can do with a PC tower without a basement, but I think it ended up not looking too bad, especially compared to the old PC I had been using since I was like 12 or so. I mean, look at this mess. They even mounted the power supply fan to be facing inside the tower. It's nothing short of a miracle that it's still working like 12 years after the fact. I mean, I kind of understand why they did it, there is no hole at the bottom of the tower, but then on the other hand, I paid them to build the best PC for a certain budget, so they could have included a tower with some holes for the power supply. Goes without saying, there is no comparing the old PC to the new one. And that's it, the PC is now built! I wanted to put the glass wall on before pulling the foil off for dramatic camera effect, but that failed miserably, so I took it down, peeled it off, and then put it back in. Not such a dramatic camera effect, but it still feels great. And there is the final product. The RGB is not really synced, but who cares about that? It shines and it looks pretty, so I'm satisfied. The MSI BIOS is super user-friendly, so if I ever want to overclock anything, I'm very certain I'll be able to do so. And if not successfully, then at least I'll never be cold during winter times anymore. One thing to mention is that the RAM were kept at 2700 MHz by default for some reason, so if you're ever building a PC, don't forget to change that. Here are the benchmarks if you were interested, pretty nice if I may say so myself. And yes, I can hear you laughing at me for installing the CPU cooler upside down. Well, the joke's on you, because I installed it the way intentionally to be a little bit more like Henry Cavill, so haha, right back at you. But the real benchmark is of course going to be none other than dun dun dun, Assassin's Creed Odyssey at max details on a 4K TV. On my last PC the average was around 25 FPS on medium details on Full HD resolution. Now, a solid 40 with VSync on 4K and max details. Sitting here like this, I'm starting to question if I even need a girlfriend anymore, or if she's now basically just a distraction keeping me away from all this glorious virtual beauty. The only problem I have at the moment is that I blew all of my savings on this machine and I have nothing left to actually buy the games to play on it. So to help me out, please consider subscribing. You can do so by clicking here. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if you think it was a total piece of shit. You can watch 2 of my previous videos by clicking here. You can follow me on some social media in the description down below. YouTube is still not letting me put my Twitter in the actual video because I'm apparently neither relevant nor interesting. Nothing to disagree about there, I guess.